Hello and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today we are looking at small leaf black tea from EcoChar, and it's made from Ying Xiang. That's why, of course, we're looking at this in our mini-series Cultivars in Disguise, Ying Xiang. This tea, looking at the packaging, is from summer 2025 and it hails from Fenghuang, Lugu in Taiwan at a relatively low altitude of 700 meters. A couple of things about this tea that we should point out. It's called small leaf black tea as opposed to something like an Assamico or Assamica strains where the leaves are bigger. There's a variety of cultivars that can be grouped collectively as small leaf. It's also been processed slightly differently than you might expect for a Hongcha or a black tea. The most obvious one is that the leaves have been rolled in the manner of oolongs rather than black tea, which means that this tea can hold 75 grams, whereas some of the black teas from, or Hongchas from EcoChar, even in a box this size, they're only holding about 38. And it's because you can't really vacuum pack a black tea if it's processed the normal way, because you would simply crush the leaves into powder. And it's also gone, as apparently the small leaf black teas are, it's had processing again similar to oolong in that the leaves have been solar withered, and that adds a more distinctive character, more vibrant, complex flavor profile. So we're going to take a look at the packaging and some of the flavor notes that are provided along with that. But we're also going to take a look at the packaging, the internal packaging, and the tea, and then have our two reviews. Back soon. Here we are looking at the packaging for small leaf black tea from EcoChar. It's a 75 gram package, it's whole leaf black tea, and the flavor profile condensed is sweet, pastry, and dried fruit. If I turn this just sideways, hopefully it won't go out of focus too much. This is where the rest of the information is. We've got those tasting notes again, slightly expanded, sweet fruit, pastry aroma, rich, complex, smooth composition, notes of dried fruit, clean, dry finish. The harvest details, it's hand-picked, small batch, Fenghuang, Lugu in Taiwan, altitude of 700 meters, and it's from summer 2025. And the brewing guide is, I think, relatively consistent for EcoChar. 9 grams of tea in 300 mils at 95 degrees centigrade, steep for 3 minutes and re-steep, adjusting, of course, for taste. I'm just going to turn it back this way for a second. I'm not sure. I think the color scheme is actually, despite my lighting setup, pretty accurate. It's a chocolate brown with slightly reddish notes. What I'm going to do now is just pause this and then we'll take a look at the internal packaging. You can tell I haven't actually opened this package before because it's still got the protective sort of concertinaing cardboard or thick paper around the packet of tea. So let's take that off. And here we have our 75 gram packet of tea from ecochar.com, the small leaf black tea, and it has the same chocolate, slightly reddish brown label. So let's take a look at the tea inside. Here we are looking at small leaf black tea from ecochar.com. A reminder that this is a black tea, and yet the leaves have been processed as if they were oolong leaves in the sense of being rolled and turned into these tea beads. On average, these tea beads are pretty consistent size-wise. They're coming in at maybe 2 or 3 millimeters, fairly consistently. There is some fragmentary material, but that's only to be expected. Uniformly, well, almost exclusively uniformly a dark color. It doesn't quite show under this light, but it looks like very small raisins or currants just in terms of the color. Let's try a small experiment. Let's see what it looks like if I turn the external light off. That might show it more clearly. Yeah, I think you get a better sense there. You get to see that it's a sort of very dark color. The stem material on the edges of the tea beads are coming in at a brown, but other than that, it's really consistent. I'm just going to put the lighting back on for my sake. There we go. And the aroma of the leaves It's very, very fruity. It's almost plums, I would say. It's a strong sort of dried plum smell. Very, very sweet, very, very fruity, but a kind of dark fruit. Very inviting. And I am very much looking forward now to trying this tea. So let's get on with our reviews. Here we are with what I'm going to, from this video and future videos, call the tasting part of the video rather than the review, if the whole video is meant to be a review. So here is our tasting for the Ying Xiang black tea, the small leaf black tea. The reason we have 4 jugs is the same reason we were using multiple jugs for the tasting of the Hong Oolong. I'd be curious to know whether a different temperature will bring out different flavour aspects and therefore give us a different flavour profile. So I have here 3.5 grams of tea, 150 mils of water, 90 degrees centigrade, steeped for 3.5 minutes. The same tea leaves then re-steeped in another 150 mils for another 3.5 minutes, and the same process here at 95. Let's take a look at the 2 first steepings, and the first thing I see is that actually the 90 degrees centigrade is darker than the 95, much to my surprise. If the 90 is a sort of honey colour, I think that's a nice way to put it, a honey colour, the first steeping at 95 is more like brass. And then if we take a look at the second steepings, I would say it's even more obvious that the second steep at 90 is darker than the second steep at 95. Why? I don't know. As far as I know, I kept the parameters just the same. It may just be a quirk of how the leaves behave. So let's try the aroma for the 90 degrees first steep. There is something slightly cocoa-y, that high oxidation, but it's a lot of red fruits and some sweetness and a bit of honey, I would say. Let's try the second steep at 90. There's a little bit of a tang. I don't mean a tang as in anything's overbrewed or too many tannins. Just like a fruity tang. And a lot of sweetness. I couldn't say what kind of fruit, but there's a lot of sort of tangy fruit there. First steep at 95. Now that's actually a much more sort of cherry red fruit aroma with some sweetness and some honey. It's actually it's lighter at 95 than at 90, which is an interesting quirk. Let's try the second steep at 95. Just honey. And I say just as if there's something wrong with that. What I'm really getting is honey and a sort of high oxidation note. So let's try tasting the 90 first steep. A lot of red fruit. Light to medium. Flavours dropping off fairly quickly, but really refreshing and light. There's definitely some honey notes coming in, some dried fruit. Let's try our second steeping at 90. Hopefully the body will pick up and the duration of the flavour. More sugar on the cup. It's not dropping off as quickly. I don't want to do a third steeping because we'll be here all day, but the sweetness is there. There is something more complicated waiting in the background. I suspect, treated just right, there would be a lot of fruit in this. maybe 95 is the way to kind of bring that out. By fruit, I mean a sort of dried fruit, something complex. Some dried fruit, some honey, bit of leather. It's pushing beyond sweet almost into savoury. That's interesting. And at 95, there's some creaminess there. That's still about light medium in terms of body. The same is true in all of these. That's become a little bit drying, not in a bad way, but it's worth noting. The honey is staying, and it's quite a kind of complex honey note. But again, I'd be hard-pressed to say, is there a particular kind of fruit there? But there's something there. It's not just pure honey, but there's a lot of honey notes dancing, quite complex ones. So the fruit's dropped out at 95 by the time the second steeping. The honey's really come to the fore. In terms of the first, in terms of 90 degrees, I beg your pardon, that was 95. Try again what's happening at 90. Something tangy, a little bit fruity. I think we'll go with 95. 95 is bringing honey and a lot more cream, and I think that would be something very welcome to discover in a Gongfu. And maybe if we tweak the parameters a bit further still, we might manage to get some of the dried fruit and really kind of bring that to the fore. So we're going to go with 95, and we're going to hunt for the honey notes and the creaminess. So let's move on to our Gongfu tasting. Here we are at the final part of our video, a tasting of our Ying Xiang black tea Hong Cha through a Gongfu session. In the previous part of the video, we ascertained that 95 was the temperature that seemed to be bringing out a flavour profile of honey and creaminess, and that seemed more preferable to a welcome but slightly more generic kind of red fruit, a light kind of red fruit and sweetness. So let's see if we can't sort of pursue that honey or cream profile through our Gongfu. We have a water at 95, unsurprisingly. Our 3 grams of tea, our shallow, our smaller gaiwan, shall I say, wide brim bracing. We have a water jug off to one side. I've got my trusty notepad and my stopwatch. So I think we have everything's pre-warmed, of course, as well. So I think we can begin. I think we will start with, I'm not sure how well this will react. It didn't, this tea is relatively reluctant when it came to Western, but who knows, maybe it'll be more amenable to a Gongfu session. So let's try, that's a long-winded way of saying we'll try and see what the tea looks like at 45. Ooh, quite some popping there, you can actually hear it. Usually I can only see it. That's encouraging. So I enjoyed doing a kind of double tasting for the Hong Cha at 1995, as I did when it came to the Hong Oolong, because it's remarkable the difference that 5 degrees can make. Some teas, something is lost by bumping up the temperature. Other teas, something is gained. And if it starts out good, and then it just gets better while you want to watch. Slight creaminess there. We'll go to 55. Slight tartness. So that's good. I can hear the rattle of the beads there. They're not quite at that velvet pebble stage, although the stalk material is slightly rehydrated. You can have a look for yourself there. You see it's not taking up much room in the gaiwan. Colour-wise, a pretty straightforward yellow, quite a deep, dark yellow colour, very nice. Some honey notes there. And something else, I'm not quite sure what. Is there maybe some cream, or is it more like a sort of slightly baked or roasted flavour? Plenty of honey on the cup. Definitely some honey there. Flavour is dropping off a little. That's my son going into the kitchen, but he's nice and quiet. It's more sort of light honey, although I will say it's very smooth. So I'm wondering whether there's some sort of creamy elements, but just faint enough that it's giving a sensation of creaminess. Okay, that was 55. I think we might do 50, because I really don't want it to get drying and spoil what we've got here. So we might bring that back down to 50. Given the beads are slightly more hydrated than they were. And the last tea in this mini series is the aged oolong, and I went to a few websites and consulted the AI Oracle, and they all said boiling water or just off the boil. So that makes life a lot easier. And I didn't see much recommendation for Western or Teapot, and instead to go straight for Gongfu. So for the next video, that might make life easier if we just go straight for the max. So here we are at 55 again. Yeah, that's darker. That was a good shout. Definitely rich honey notes coming through there. I'll just note that that was 55, not 50. There we go. The tea beads are now, I suppose because it's quite small, they have kind of jumped past the sort of velvet coated pebble stage and straight into tightly bound but soft, if that makes sense. Colour, we're now at copper, I would say, straight up copper. Definitely cream. Yeah, cream and either something fruity or picking up that sort of higher oxidation, cocoa-y note, something to make it quite complex. So there's cream, there's a bit of sweet, and maybe some fruit or just that red fruit bordering into chocolate, high oxidation note. That's what's coming through on the cup. Yeah, the honey note's there, but it's backed up by something a little more rounded. Is there any cream? It's still more smoothness rather than cream, and it's just under medium in terms of body. We'll finish that, which is always a good sign. Yes, it's definitely a kind of fruity, tangy, fruity note. Okay. We're going to check this at 40 this time. Now I've got hiccups. I didn't need that. That's not. That doesn't add to the innate dignity. You've got the hiccups. Thankfully, that's never happened during a sermon. I've had a coughing fit. I once had a bride at a wedding who had a tremendous coughing fit. It was purely nerves. So we just gave her 5 minutes to calm down, and then we able to restart. So 45, a little vague, but there's something building up. I think we'll just do 55 again. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's more red still. Are we going to get into an actual sort of red fruit territory? I'm liking the honey notes, though. I would have said there's red fruits there. Ooh, almost burnt honey. Not in any way astringent or something anomalous. Honey or treacle, so you get the sort of slight bitterness as well as the sweetness. And there's a definite fruity edge there. I would say it's more of a stewed fruit. I'm not picking up something that you would say is cherries or any kind of fruit, forest fruits or anything like that. It's more, that tang is what makes me think it's a sort of a cooked fruit taste, like a mild stewed plum flavour. Loads of honey on the cup. Body is dropped. The cocoa edge is really there, but so is the fruit. So is the honey. It's lovely. Not sure I can't remember if we took a look at the colour of that. We are into what the bronze. That's a bronze colour. Nice bronze colour. Yeah. Very good. And the leaves are, it's hard to tell because they're so light. They almost feel like dried leaves. And it's also difficult to know how much of the original shape they'll regain. If we take a look at this one, it's quite soft, but it hasn't changed its shape. But there's one or two leaves in here that have. That's almost back to normal in terms of expanding sideways, which makes me think we should have a fourth steeping. And we will need more water, so we'll give that a shake. Let me just show you. That's entire. That's pretty much the bottom of the gaiwan filled up now. It's almost raspberries on the cup. The green oolongs always give off a sort of coconut smell, whereas the red teas, red oolongs, it's much more sort of fresh red fruit smell. Very nice. So let's just finish this. Just collect my thoughts on that flavour. The body is below medium again, and slightly drying. But I do like that slightly tannic cocoa-y edge. That's adding a certain bit of bite to it. Right, we need more water to cover these leaves, give them some room. So we're going to give it, that's about 90, I would say. And we'll turn that off. And we'll call that quits for this steeping. In fact, I've just been planning in my mind there what I might do for the next video when it's the aged oolong. And I might simply do two Gongfus, one at 95 and another at 100, just to see if once again we're picking up something different out of the tea. And I might start with 100. No, nothing's really, just a sort of vague herbal vegetable quality there. So 55 is what the other three have been running at. 3 steepings, that is. We need to push beyond that. It's minute 5. We'll call it minute 10 actually. I'll call that quits. The honey is back and the fruit is back. Fantastic. So I'm just going to pour some of this out so it's cool by the time we have got round to trying it. Yeah, those leaves are a bit more steeped, but I don't think they're going to get much more volume. But the ones that can have expanded a bit. Let me just show you, not how much of that you can see. Oops. If they don't fall out, how much of that you can actually see. Colour-wise, slightly lighter than the last one, so we're back to somewhere between copper and bronze, I would say. A gentle honey, but that's front and centre. And that tannic edge, that cocoa-y high oxidation edge. Trying to see if there's anything behind it, if it cools, as it cools. Yeah, something, a touch of leather again. And the red fruits are there, wonderful. The red fruits and the honey on the cup. That was good. It is slightly drying, which is starting to become slightly distracting. But it's all there. The honey is there, that's slightly burnt honey, so you've got the cocoa edge, and you've got red fruit. The body is below medium, but that's the sweet spot. And it's definitely getting sweetness and fruit lingering on the palate. Okay, now that's interesting because I was chasing the cream, but the fruit is there. It's just really got to push this to get to the fruit. The cream has never really sort of made much of an appearance except to add smoothness to the tea, but the honey has been there really powerfully, sometimes with a tannic edge, so it's like a burnt honey or like a treacle molasses, and sometimes much more straightforward, although complex, sweet honey flavour. Yeah, very nice. So, a very interesting tea, well worth getting. Might even be worth trying at 100 for really short steeps at the Gongfu, or shorter steeps for the Western style. But it's a lovely tea. After all that pushing, there's a bit of drying, but there's no oversteeping qualities whatsoever. None at all. Instead, we're dancing, we're playing with red fruit and honey and some cream. So, a really, really enjoyable tea. And if there was a straightforward standalone video, I'd be heartily recommending it without hesitation. But because it's part of this bigger picture and we're just looking at this tea, I will say I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you have. I got this from Eco-Char, so as a matter of courtesy, I would advise, if you're interested, to go through them to get the tea. And to conclude, as always, happy steeping, and God bless.